I don't know if anyone's out there or not. So I don't know if the sound alerts are going out. What's the where the ads playing? Of course, for some reason my whole screen isn't loading. So there's that. I don't want to have to open a non-logged in window to see if things are playing. I don't have the screen open right now, so if anyone wants to do any sound alerts, it might actually scare me. No? No takers? Okay. Well. Because I've got monitor turned off on the sound alerts. Monitor is supposed to be me hearing myself, not what the stream is. I don't know. I will never get this figured out. But, whatever. Hi everyone. If you didn't know, which probably means you haven't followed my Twitter all that closely, past couple of weeks I have been trying to get a compilation of stories that I've told printed and sellable. That way it's got my own little captions on, some of my opinions of the stories. I do interrupt in the stories a lot because that's really what I'm thinking when I'm reading them. My editor made me keep it short. I don't know why. The first one only has 15 stories. And right now we're just Waiting on the Kindle Direct publication. I think KDP. Yeah, Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing. To get that figured out. Because we were having apparently weird issues today that I could not see what the problem was. It said things weren't credited the same way between the books, and that's it. I was copied and pasted the things between each other, so I don't know why they'd be different. But hey Wolfie, how you doing? Just kind of rambling about the book I was putting together, and I've started trying to rewatch my stream so I could put together the second one because I'm doing the books based off of the stories that I stream. Yeah, should be interesting. Be nice if I can ever get it done. And I haven't done my usual plug-in like the bookstore outlet that I've got. Ooh, what you got LA for? A long time ago, I used to live in Anaheim. I didn't get to go into Los Angeles that much, but I only had the one car between my wife and I, so that was kind of a pain. So you find anything good at the shops? I don't know music in the bookstore. Ooh, an XL plush. Those are adorable. Let's see, you used to be in Tustin, now you're in Ventura. I think when I was in Anaheim, I was maybe a mile or two out, well, from the Orange County Center. But the apartment I was in was almost halfway between Knott's Berry Farm and Disneyland. So it was a interesting place to live. Of course, let's see, I worked in Garden Grove and I worked in Cypress. My wife worked in Rolling Hills. We were all over the place. I really liked how the neighborhoods were. I had some friends that were I can't remember. I can't remember what town it was, but they were like maybe a mile or two away, and it's like we went to visit them a couple of times, and since my wife worked at the movie theater there in the Rolling Hills Mall, we got to see a lot of early movies. I didn't really get to do Knott's Berry Farm that much. I think I spent more time there when they were doing the Halloween stuff. Because Knott's Scary Farm is pretty fun. I'm trying to think of what year it was we were out there. I was working for Kodak, so it would have to have been an hour away. Well, that's not too bad though. And there's nothing overly entertaining in my area for 17 miles, and that's just a big hole in the ground. And closest. Hey, Sandwich, congratulations on getting first. How you doing, kitty? Oh yeah, I forgot the mystery was here. No, that's right. It's been a weird day. So trying to figure out because I got the emails from the Kindle that I was supposed to be getting the book published through, and they said that for some reason things weren't matching up on it. And I said, well, okay, well, I went to it, looked at it, everything looked fine, and they sent me a notice on the other book, and I said, well, crap, it's the exact same information. Why is it not working? Oh well. So delay on the book again. Aha, I got the mysterious. So nerves haven't exactly been great about the book either. And that's on top of, still needing the money to get the artwork. Guess I could. Let me see. Add page. Okay. Let me see if I can get a picture of the book up on your screen. Just have to find the right folder. There it is. Okay. Except for the hardcover version. And it's taking up the whole screen. Shook. Yay, book. Why is it not? Oh, because mine. Ah, God. My video had stopped, so I couldn't see what was going on. But yeah, the book. Back up. Look at the handsome guy right there. Look at him. Portrait that Dusk had made of me last year, I think. Oh. Trying to move things. Got too many stuff, and I only got one screen to control everything with. But that one. Right back. Hardback that will never be on a green screen because it is green. Let's see. Guess I could try to make them scale. They're gonna be 7x10, so about that size. Yeah. And they're essentially supposed to be kids' books, but they're for parents to read to kids. Plug in the book. It's not even for sale yet. But anyway, look at that. And yes, I do have it labeled as book 1. Okay, Sam, roll for initiative. A little lower blurb up there. Oh well. I love the short little author bio I put on there. And then my weird ass editor decided to put his commentary on it. See? But anyway. Yeah. So he's not very happy about trying to figure out how things are working either, so. Of course, he kept telling me to shut up because he was having trouble typing. But let's see, I don't think I have any of the pictures inside the book on the screen. Oh, I do have. Oh yeah, I have the screenshot. Okay, let's see if I can get this open. I mean, I don't really mean to ramble, but you know, when I'm telling stories, it happens. But yeah, I have that wonderful dedication page and me putting in my forward to it. And of course, I went ahead and credited Dusk for the picture. So. Yeah, dedications of the books. Yep, she's in a book, and I told her about it and made sure that she wanted to use the card link because it's got more detail for it. Uh, I've actually changed it to where her name is, so. But yes, Dusk is in a book that hopefully will be published sometime soon. You know, if I can figure out what they want from me. And I have, I think I put it on my Twitter post about the artwork that if people donated to it, I am putting a page at the end of that book to list all the people who helped. So there's that. And I've only got one person so far because Oniharo donated. So. So it kept making me wonder because they were saying that the author listing didn't look right. I looked at it and uh, I didn't see anything wrong with it. It said that they weren't the same, and literally in the email they sent me, they were marked the exact same. So credited for some reason it put my editor's name first. I thought that was weird. It's like it has him listed as contributor, then contributor, then as me listed as author. But I don't know why they thought that was weird. Admittedly, I did spell, Will's first name wrong. I had one too many L's. But that's just me. So I think I'll leave the pictures of the books up here. uh, I guess I should get over to the reading screen eventually. Yeah, everyone's having a hard time. I mean, I shipped off another box of comics today, hopefully to get a little bit more. As I said, if you can't, don't worry about it, 'cause I'm in no rush. I mean, I'm in a rush to get the standard ones out, because I can, turn around and use those to get the art one out, but Cranidos. Let me get over to the window. Let's see. Yeah, library. Yeah, library. I have so many freaking scenes. It's unreal. And I didn't replace all of them. But we're reading more from Beauty and the Beast book tonight. And it's kind of cool because the first story in tonight's is actually Cinderella. To fix my audio again because audio. Okay, now I can hear it. Okay, and it says sound alert is on. So I'm going to try one. The question is, do you hear it? Because I'm hearing it. So I don't know what's going on. You cannot. No. I do not know why that refuses to work. Because I originally was trying to set it up so I could have them go off in the stream but not be on the VOD. Did that come out? just none of my audio ever wanted to work. Don't hear any. I'm hearing them. But I don't know why they're not coming out on the stream. I can't think of anything that would be causing it. So on the sound alerts dashboard, it says everything's working. OBS is weird at the best of times. The problem is with desktop audio, I wouldn't be able to hear myself at all. Well, I would hear constant echo, and that would just feedback loop. Let's see if it works like this. I didn't do anything this time. Oh, because I muted it, duh. Okay. So if I mute my playback, oh, sure, now it's not going to do it. See what it does when I do the howl. Okay, I played it that time. Not hearing any looping, so that's good. That's just confusing. I have to make sure that no other sounds come out. Yeah, it was really bad. I just went to the went to the bathroom, sat there, and recorded myself howling. Went to the bathroom, sat there, and recorded myself howling. Okay, am I hearing myself echo? It's really faint. Okay, I didn't hear it that time. I guess if I'm not really loud, then it should matter. I guess if I muted my stream audio, you would still hear sound if I'm hearing it. It's like right now, I don't hear my voice at all because I muted my stream window. But if I still play the audio, it'll go through. So that should essentially play out into the stream, right? Okay, did you hear that? A woo. Okay, so I have to have all my other audio off. It's no lurking in other people's windows.
Everyone's always asking, "What the dog doing?" Who's gonna ask, "How the dog doing?" Dog doing good.
Okay, heard that. To close all my lurking windows. But it bothers me because when I can't hear myself, I don't know if my own audio is going out. Which I got a comment on one of my videos from last year. Someone was going through my Irish folktale stories, and apparently the third video I did, no sound at all. And I probably wouldn't have even known if they hadn't commented on the video. So I'm a little questioning about audio now a bit anymore. So. But from what I can tell, it's all working now. Hold on, let me see if I can fix one more thing, because I don't want it to be on VOD. Okay. I don't mind if I hear it, and I don't mind if you guys hear it, but did that one come out? Okay. But I'm trying to keep the sound alerts and stuff off the VODs because, I do post the stories. So it makes it really... It doesn't mind if it bothers me, but I don't want it to interrupt the story if someone's listening to it later. That's why I've got another setup for doing the same thing that I've got set as my YouTube version when I'm just straight reading. That's how I'm doing the Wizard of Oz and all the other ones. But if you guys want to play any sound alerts while I'm reading normally, that's cool. I'm just trying to honestly let you guys do more because I know I get really wrapped up in the reading. It's like I wish I had more people in chat just so you guys could talk among yourselves because I have issues stopping reading to talk because I will lose my place. It happens a lot. Anyway, first story I do have on tonight is actually Cinderella. Ooh, an electrode. Don't think I have one of those yet. Yeah, first story I have is Cinderella, and it's a very long second name. Let's see, get to the book. It's either Cinderella or the Little Glass Slipper, because as people know, it's all about the shoes. So, as they say in the game Fable, let us begin. Cinderella, or the Little Glass Slipper, as found in the Blue Fairy Book. Once there was a gentleman who married, for his second wife, the proudest and most haughty woman that has ever been. She had, by a former husband, 2 daughters of her own humor, who were, indeed, exactly like her in all things. He had likewise by another wife a young daughter, but of unparalleled goodness and sweetness of temper, which she took from her mother, who was the best creature in the world. No sooner were the ceremonies of the wedding over, but the mother-in-law began to show herself in her true colors. She could not bear the good qualities of this pretty girl, and the less because they made her own daughters appear more odious. She employed her in the meanest work of the house. She scoured the dishes, tables, etc., and scrubbed Madame's chamber, and those of Mrs., her daughters. She lay up in a great sorry garret, upon a wretched straw bed, while her sisters lay in fine rooms, with walls all inlaid, upon beds of the very newest fashion, and they had looking-glasses so large that they might see themselves at their full length, from head to foot. Silver. The poor girl bore all patiently, and dared not tell her father. Okay. Are you hearing the other sounds on my computer? If you're hearing the notification messages, it's just going to be more of a nuisance. I have to switch back to just regular audio. at which time I will gladly restart the story. Though, if it's not going to the... I will definitely have to check with Bot after this, because I'm not sure if the audio is going to be saved on it, because I have it supposedly turned off on there or not. So I need to figure out how to get this out. Audio output. Bot track. It's 1. Audio track 2. I'll have to figure it out later. I'm going to restart the story anyway, just because I'm a perfectionist. No, I'm not. If you've read my writing, you know I'm not a perfectionist. But anyway, we're only an hour in, so it doesn't matter. If this is the only story tonight, well, so be it. I will try to read one long. Oh, well, Cinderella isn't really that long anyway. But, take 2. Cinderella, or the Little Glass Slipper, from the Blue Fairy Book. Once there was a gentleman who married, for his second wife, the proudest and most haughty woman that was ever seen. She had, by a former husband, 2 daughters of her own humor, who were indeed exactly like her in all things. He had likewise, by another wife, a young daughter, but of unparalleled goodness and sweetness of temper, which she took from her mother, who was the best creature in the world. No sooner were the ceremonies of the wedding over, but the mother-in-law began to show herself in her true colors. She could not bear the good qualities of this pretty girl, and the less because they made her own daughters appear more odious. She employed the meanest work of the house, and scoured the dishes and tables, and scrubbed the madam's chamber, and those of Mrs. her daughters. She lay up in a sorry garret, upon a wretched straw bed, while her sisters lay in fine rooms, with floors all inlaid, upon beds of the very newest fashion, and where they had looking-glasses so large that they might set themselves at their full length from head to foot. The poor girl bore all patiently, and dared not tell her father, who would have rattled her off, for his wife governed him entirely. When she had done her work, she used to go to the chimney-corner and sit down among the cinders and ashes, which made her commonly called Cinder Wench. But the youngest, who was not so rude and uncivil as the eldest, called her Cinderella. However, Cinderella, notwithstanding her mean apparel, was 100 times handsomer than her sisters, though they were always dressed very richly. Now, it happened that the king's son gave a ball, and invited all persons of fashion to it. The young misses were also invited, for they cut a very grand figure among the quality. They were mightily delighted at this invitation, and wonderfully busy in choosing out such gowns, petticoats, and head clothes as might become them. This was a new trouble for Cinderella, for it was she who ironed the sisters' linen, plaited their ruffles, and they talked all day long of nothing but how they should be dressed. "For my part," said the oldest, "I will wear a red velvet suit with French trimming." "And I," said the youngest, "shall have my usual petticoat. But then, to make amends for that, I will put on a gold-flowered manteau and my diamond stomacher, which is far from being the most ordinary one in the world." They sent for the best tire woman they could get to make up their headdresses and adjust their double pinners, and they had their red brushes and patches from Mademoiselle de la Poche. Cinderella was likewise called up to them to be consulted in all these matters, for she had excellent notions, and advised them always for the best, nay, and offered her services to dress their heads, which they were very willing she should do. As she was doing this, they said to her, "Cinderella, would you not be glad to go to the ball?" "Alas," she said, "you only jeer me. It is not for such that I am to go there." "Thou art in the right of it all," they replied. "It would make people laugh to see a cinder wench at the ball." Anyone but Cinderella would have dressed their heads awry, but she was very good and dressed them perfectly well. They were almost 2 days without eating, so much they were transported with joy. They broke above a dozen laces in trying to get the laces to close up, and they might have been a fine slender shape, and they were continually at their looking glass. At last the happy day came, and they went to court, and Cinderella followed them with her eyes as long as she could, and when she had lost sight of them, she fell crying. Her godmother, who saw her all in tears, asked her what was the matter. I wish I could. I wish I could." She was not able to speak the rest, being interrupted by her tears and sobbing. Her godmother of hers, who was a fairy, said to her, "Thou wishest thou couldst go to the ball. Is it not so?" Yes," cried Cinderella with a great sigh. "Well," said her godmother, "be but a good girl, and I will contrive thou shalt go." Then she took her into the chamber and said to her, "Run into the garden and bring me a pumpkin." Cinderella went immediately to gather the finest she could get, and brought it to her godmother, not being able to imagine how this pumpkin could make her go to the ball. Her godmother scooped out all the inside of it, having left nothing but the rind, and when done, she struck it with her wand, and the pumpkin was instantly turned into a fine coach, gilded all over with gold. Shiny. She then went to look at her mouse trap. There she found 6 mice, all alive, and ordered Cinderella to lift up the little trap door, when giving each mouse as she went out a little tap with her wand. The mouse was that moment turned into a fine horse, and altogether made a very fine set of 6 horses, of a beautiful mousy dapple gray. Being at a loss for a coachman, "I will go and see," said Cinderella. "If there is never a rat in the rat trap, we may make a coachman of him." "Thou art in the right," replied her godmother. "Go and look." Cinderella brought the trap to her, and there were 3 large rats. The fairy made choice of one of the 3, which was the largest beard, and having touched him with her wand, he turned into a fat, jolly coachman, who had the smartest whiskers eyes had ever beheld. After that she said to her, "Go again to the garden. You will find 6 lizards behind the watering pot. Bring them to me." She had no sooner done so, but her godmother turned them into 6 footmen, who skipped up immediately behind the coach, with their liveries all bedaubed with gold and silver, and clung as close behind the other as they could get. They had nothing else to do with their lives. The fairy then said to Cinderella, "Well, you see here an equipage fit to go to the ball with. Are you not pleased with it?" "Oh, yes," she cried, "but I must go thither as I am, in these nasty rags." Her godmother only touched her with her wand, and at the same time her clothes were turned into cloth of gold and silver, all beset with jewels. This done, she gave her a pair of glass slippers, the prettiest in the whole world. Thus, being decked out, she got up into her coach, but her godmother, above all things, commanded her not to telling her at the same time that if she stayed 1 moment longer, the coach would be a pumpkin again, her horses mice, her coachman a rat, and her footmen lizards, and all her clothes just as they were before. Penguin. She promised her godmother she would not fail of leaving the ball before midnight. And then away she drives, scarce able to contain herself for joy. The king's son, who was told that a great princess whom nobody knew was coming, and ran out to receive her. He gave her his hand, and she alighted out of the coach, and led her into the ball among all the company. There she was immediately in a profound silence. They left off dancing, and the violin ceased to play, so attentive was everyone to contemplate the singular beauties of the unknown newcomer. Nothing was heard but a confused noise of, "Oh, how handsome she is! Oh, how handsome she is!" Thank you for the 4 months, Papa Penguin. The king himself, as old as he was, could not help watching her and telling the queen softly that it has been a long time since he has seen such a beautiful and lovely creature. At which he elbowed him. All the ladies were busied in concerning her clothes and headdress, that they might have some day made the next day after the same pattern, provided they could meet with such fine material and able hands to make them. The king's son conducted her to the most honorable seat, and afterward took her out to dance with him. She danced so gracefully that after all more and more admired her. A fine collation was served up, wherefore the prince ate not a morsel, so intently was he busied gazing on her. She went and sat down by her sisters, showing them 1,000 civilities, giving them part of the oranges and citrons which the prince has presented with her, which very much surprised them, for they did not know her. While Cinderella was thus amusing her sisters, she heard the clock strike 11 and 3/4, whereupon she immediately made a curtsy to the company and hasted away as fast as she could. Being got home, she ran to seek out her godmother. After having thanked her, she said that she could not but heartily wish she might go the next day to the ball, because the king's son desired her to. As she was eagerly telling her godmother whatever had passed at the ball, her two sisters knocked at the door, which Cinderella ran and opened. "How long have you stayed?" she cried, gaping, rubbing her eyes and stretching herself, as if she had just waked herself out of sleep. She hadn't. She didn't want to give any manner of inclination to sleep as they went from home. "If thou hast been to the ball," said one of her sisters, "thou wouldst not have been tired with it. There came thither the finest princess, the most beautiful ever was seen both mortal eyes. She showed us 1,000 civilities, and gave us orange and citrons." Cinderella seemed very indifferent in the matter. Indeed, she asked them the name of that princess, but they told her they did not know it, and that the king's son was very uneasy on her account and would give all the world to know who she was. After this, Cinderella smiled, replying, "She must then be very beautiful indeed. How happy you have been! Could not I see her? Ah, dear Miss Charlotte, do lend me your yellow suit of clothes which you wear every other day." "Ay, to be sure," cried Miss Charlotte. "Lend my clothes to such a dirty cinder wench as thou art? I should be a fool." Cinderella indeed expected well such an answer, and was very glad to the refusal, for she would have been sadly put to it if her sisters had lent her what she had asked in jest. The next day the two sisters were at the ball, and so was Cinderella, but dressed more magnificently than before. The king's son was always by her, and never ceased his compliments and kind speeches to her, to whom all of this was so far from being tiresome that she quite forgot what her grandmother had recommended to her. So at last she counted the clock striking 12. When she took it to be no more than 11. When she rose up and fled, nimble as a deer. The prince followed, but could not overtake her. She left behind one of her glass slippers, which the prince took up most carefully. She got home, but quite out of breath, and her nasty old clothes having nothing left her of her finery but one of the glass slippers. Fellow to that she dropped. The guards at the palace gate were asked if they had not seen the princess go out, who said they had seen nobody go out but a young girl, very meanly dressed, and who had more an air of poor country wench than of a gentlewoman. When the two sisters returned from the ball, Cinderella asked them if they had been well diverted, and if the fine lady had been there. They told her yes, but she hurriedly away immediately when it struck 12, and with such haste that she dropped one of her little glass slippers, the prettiest in the world, which the king's son had taken up. He had done nothing but look at her all the time at the ball, and most certainly he was very much in love with this beautiful person who owned the glass slipper. what they said was very true. For a few days after, the king's son caused it to be proclaimed, by a sound of trumpet, that he would marry her whose foot the slipper would just fit. They whom he employed began to try it upon princesses, then the duchesses, and all the court, but in vain. It was brought to the two sisters, who did all they possibly could to thrust their feet into the slipper, but they could not effect it. Cinderella, who saw this, and knew her slipper, said it to them, laughing, "Let me see if it will not fit me." Her sisters burst out laughing and began to banter her. The gentleman who was sent to try the slipper looked earnestly at Cinderella, and, finding her very handsome, said it was but just that she should try, and that he had orders to let everyone make trial. He obliged Cinderella to sit down, and putting the slipper to her foot, he found it went on very easily, and fitted her as if it had been made of wax. The astonishment her two sisters were in was excessively great, but still abundantly greater when Cinderella pulled out of her pocket the other slipper and put it on her foot. Thereupon in came her godmother, who, having touched with her wand Cinderella's clothes, made them richer and more magnificent than any of those she had before. And now her two sisters found her to be that fine, beautiful lady whom they had seen at the ball, and threw themselves at her feet to beg pardon at all the ill treatments they had made her undergo. Cinderella took them up, and she embraced them and cried. She forgave them with all her heart, and desired them to always love her. She conducted to the young prince, and dressed as she was, and he thought her more charming than ever, and a few days after married her. Cinderella, who was no less good than beautiful, gave her two sisters lodgings at the palace, and that very same day matched them with two great lords of the court. Wow, that seems like the Disney-fied version. That's one of the things about fun stories like this, is there's so many different versions you can find. Personally, I prefer the stepmother having her daughters cut off pieces of her foot to see if they can get that in the shoe, but still. Maybe that's just my bloodlust. uh, I mean, I prefer, well, as much as I like Into the Woods, that's a lot longer story, but really. Full version, the prince set the trap to get from the pitch. I think at one point the slippers were silver. There's just so many variations of the story out there. The only thing that really contains through is evil stepsister and stepmother. Notice her father wasn't mentioned at all after the fact of saying that he was pretty much whipped. I only had that one sister's name. I'm impressed. That must have been the older sister. But yeah. Fairy tales. But anyway, we go from New Princess to the next story, The Grateful Prince, as found in the Violet Fairy book. Once upon a time, the king of the Goldland lost himself in a forest, and try as he would, he could not find the way out. He was wandering down one path which looked at the first time more hopeful than the rest he had seen, and he saw a man coming towards him. "What are you doing here, friend?" asked the stranger. "The darkness is falling fast, and soon the wild beasts will come out from the lairs and seek for food." "I have lost myself," answered the king, "and am trying to get home." "Then promise me that you will give me the first thing that comes out of your house, and I will show you the way," said the stranger. The king did not answer directly, but after a while he spoke. "Why should I give away my best sporting dog? I can surely find my own way out of the forest as well as this man." So the stranger left him. But the king followed path after path for 3 whole days, with no better luck or success than before. He was almost in despair when the stranger suddenly appeared, blocking up his way. "Promise me you will give me the first thing that comes out of your house to meet you." But the king was stiff-necked and would promise nothing. So, for some days longer, he wandered up and down the forest, trying first one path, then another, but his courage at last gave way, and he sank wearily upon the ground under a tree. Feeling sure his last hour had come. Then, for the third time, the stranger stood before the king and said, "Why are you such a fool? What can a dog be to you, that you should give up your life for him like this? Just promise me the reward I want, and I will guide you out of the forest." Thank you. "Well, my life is worth more than 1,000 dogs," answered the king. "The welfare of my kingdom depends on me. I accept your terms, so take me to my palace." Scarcely had he uttered the words when he found himself at the edge of the woods, with the palace in the dim distance. He made all the haste he could, and just as he reached the great gates, out came the nurse with the royal baby, who outstretched his arms to his father. The king shrank back and ordered the nurse to take the baby away at once. Then his great boarhound bounded up to him, but his caresses were only answered with a violent push. When the king's anger was spent, he was able to think what was best to be done. He exchanged his baby, a beautiful boy, for the daughter of a peasant, and the prince lived roughly as a son for poor people, while the little girl slept in the golden castle under silken sheets. At the end of the year, the stranger arrived to claim his property and took away the little girl, believing her to be the true child of the king. The king was so delighted with the success of his plan that he ordered a great feast to be gotten ready, and gave splendid presents to the foster parents of his son, so that he might lack nothing. But he did not dare bring back the baby, lest the trick should be found out. The peasants were quite contented with this arrangement, which gave them food and money in abundance. By and by, the boy grew big and tall, and seemed to lead a happy life in the house of his foster parents. But a shadow hung over him which really poisoned most of his pleasure, and that was the thought of the poor innocent girl who had suffered in his stead, for his foster father had told him in secret that he was the king's son. And the prince determined that when he grew old enough, he would travel all over the world and never rest until he had set her free. To become king at the cost of a maiden's life was too heavy a price to pay. So one day he put on a dress of a farm servant, threw a sack of peas on his back, and marched straight into the forest where 18 years before his father had lost himself. After he had walked some way, he began to cry loudly, "Oh, how unlucky I am! Where can I be? Is there no one to show me the way out of this wood?" Then appeared a strange man with a long gray beard, with a leather bag hanging from his girdle. He nodded cheerfully to the prince and said, "I know this place well, and can lead you out from it if you promise me a good reward." "What can a beggar such as myself promise you?" answered the prince. "I have nothing to give you save my life. Even the coat on my back belongs to my master, whom I serve for my keep and my clothes." The stranger looked at the sack of peas and said, "You must possess something. You are carrying this sack, which seems very heavy." "It's full of peas," was the reply. "My aunt died last night without leaving money enough to buy peas to give to the watchers, as is custom throughout the country. I have borrowed these peas from my master and thought to take a short cut across the forest, but I have lost myself, as you see." "Then you are an orphan?" asked the stranger. "Why should you not enter my service? I want a sharp fellow in the house, and you please me." "Why not, indeed, if we can strike a bargain?" said the other. "I was born a peasant, and strange bread is always bitter, so it is the same to me whom I serve. What wages will you give me?" "Every day fresh food, meat twice a week, butter and vegetables, your summer and winter clothes, and a portion of land for your own use." That's a hell of a bargain. Now, this bargain seemed to please the old fellow so much that he spun round like a top, and sang so loud that the whole wood rang with his voice. Then he set out with his companion, and chattered so fast that he never noticed that his new servant kept dropping peas out of the sack. At night they slept under a fig tree, and when the sun rose started on their way. About noon they came to a large stone where the old fellow stopped, looked carefully round, then gave a sharp whistle and stamped 3 times on the ground with his left foot. Suddenly there appeared under the stone a secret door which led to what looked like the mouth of a cave. The old fellow seized the youth by the arm and said roughly, "Follow me." Thick darkness surrounded them, yet it seemed to the prince that as if their paths led still deeper depths. After a long while he thought he saw a glimmer of light, but the light was neither that of the sun nor of the moon. He looked eagerly at it, but found it was a kind of pale cloud, which was all the light the strange underworld could boast. Earth and water, trees and plants, birds and beasts, each was different from those he had seen before. But what struck terror into his heart was this absolute stillness that reigned everywhere. Not a rustle, not a sound could be heard. Here and there he noticed a bird sitting on a branch with head erect and swelling throat. But his ear caught nothing. The dogs opened their mouths as if to bark. The toiling oxen seemed about to bellow, but neither bark nor bellow reached the prince. Water flowed noiselessly over pebbles. Wind blowed the tops of the trees. Flies and chaffers darted about, without breaking the silence. The old graybeard uttered no word, and when his companion tried to ask him the meaning of it all, he felt that his voice died in his throat. How long this fearful stillness lasted, I do not know, but the prince gradually felt his heart turning to ice. His hair stood up like bristles, and a cold chill was creeping up his spine. Then at last, ecstasy! A faint noise broke on his straining ears, and this life of shadows suddenly became real. It sounded as if a troop of horses were plowing their way over a moor. Then the graybeard opened his mouth and said,
"The kettle is boiling. We are expected at home."
They walked a little further till the prince thought he heard the grinding of a sawmill, as if a dozen saws were working together, but his guide observed,
"The grandmother is sleeping soundly. Listen how she snores."
When they had climbed a hill which lay before them, the prince saw in the distance was the house of his master. But it was so surrounded with buildings of all kinds that the place looked more like a village or even a small town. They reached it at last and found an empty kennel standing in front of the gate.
"Creep inside this," said the master, "and wait while I go in and see my grandmother. Like all very old people, she is obstinate and cannot bear fresh faces about her."
The prince crept trembling into the kennel and began to regret the daring which he had brought him into this scrape. By and by the master came back and called him from his hiding place. Something had put his temper, for with a frown he said,
"Watch carefully our ways in the house, and beware of making any mistake, or it will go ill with you. Keep your eyes and ears open and your mouth shut. Obey without questions. Be grateful if you will, but never speak unless you are spoken to."
When the prince stepped over the threshold, he caught sight of the maiden, of wonderful beauty, with brown eyes and fair curly hair. Well, the young man said to himself, if the old fellow has many daughters like that, I should not mind being his son-in-law. This one is just what I admire. And he watched her lay the table and bring in the food, and take her seat by the fire as if she had never noticed the strange man was present. Then she took out a needle and thread and began to darn her stockings. The master sat at the table alone, and invited neither his new servant nor the maid to eat with him. Neither was the old grandmother anywhere to be seen. His appetite was tremendous. He soon cleared all the dishes, and ate enough to satisfy a dozen men. When at last he could eat no more, he said to the girl,
"Now you can pick up the pieces and take what is left in the iron pots for your own dinner. Give the bones to the dog."
The prince did not like all the idea of dining off of scraps, which he helped the girl to pick up, but after all he found that there were plenty to eat, and that the food was very good. During the meal he stole many glances at the young maiden, and would even have spoken to her, but she gave him no encouragement. Every time he opened his mouth for the purpose, she looked at him sternly as if to say, "Silence," so he could only let his eyes speak for him. Besides, the master was stretched out on a bench by the oven after his huge meal, and would have heard everything. After supper that night, the old man said to the prince,
"For 2 days you may rest from your fatigues of the journey, and look about the house. But the day after tomorrow you must come with me, and I will point out the work you have to do. The maid will show you where you are to sleep."
The prince thought from this he had right to speak,
But his master turned on him with a face of thunder and exclaimed, "You dog of a servant! If you disobey the laws of this house, you will soon find yourself a head shorter. Hold your tongue and leave me in peace." Wow. The girl made a sign to him to follow her, and throwing open the door, nodded to him to go in. He would have lingered a moment, for he thought she looked sad, but dared not to do so for fearing of the old man's anger. "It is impossible that she can be his daughter," he said to himself, "for she has a kind heart. I'm quite sure she must be the same girl who was brought here instead of me, so I am bound to risk my head in this mad adventure." He got into bed, but it was long before he fell asleep. Even then his dreams gave him no rest. He seemed to be surrounded by dangers, and it was only the power of the maiden who helped him through it all. When he woke, his first thoughts were for the girl, whom he had found hard at work. He drew water from the well and carried it to the house for her, kindled the fire under the iron pot, and, in fact, he did everything that came into his head that he could do to be of any use to her. In the afternoon he went out in order to learn something of his new home, and wondered greatly not to come across the old grandmother. In his rambles he came to a farmyard where a beautiful white horse had a stall to itself, and another was a black cow with 2 white-faced calves, while clucking the geese, ducks, and hens reached him from a distance. Breakfast, dinner, and supper were as savory as before, and the prince would have been quite content with his quarters had it not been for the difficulty of keeping silence in the presence of the maiden. In the evening of the second day he went, as he had been told, to receive his orders for the following morning. "I'm going to set you something very easy to do tomorrow," said the old man when his servant entered. "Take the scythe and cut as much grass as the white horse will want for its feed day. Clean out its stall. If I come back and find the manger empty, it will go ill with you, so beware."
The prince left the room, rejoicing in his heart, and saying to himself, "Well, I shall soon get through that. If I have never handled either the plough or the scythe, at least I have often watched the country people work them, and know how easy it is." He was just going to open his door when the maiden glided past softly and whispered in his ear,
"What task has he set you to?"
"For tomorrow," answered the prince. "It is really nothing at all, just to cut hay for the horse and to clean out his stall."
"Oh, luckless being," sighed the girl. "How will you ever get through it? The white horse, who is our master's grandmother, is always hungry. It takes 20 men always mowing to keep it in food for one day, and another 20 to clean out its stall. How, then, do you expect to do it all by yourself? But listen to me, and do what I tell you. It is your only chance. When you have filled the manger as full as it will hold, you must weave a strong plait of rushes which grow among the meadow hay. Cut a thick peg of stout wood, and be sure that the horse sees what you are doing. Then it will ask you what it is for, and you will say, 'With this plate I intend to bind up your mouth so you cannot eat any more. With this peg I am going to keep you still in one spot, so you cannot scatter your corn and water all over this place.'"
After these words the maiden went away softly as she had come. Early the next morning he set to work. His scythe danced through the grass more easily than he had hoped, and soon he had enough to fill the manger. He put it in the crib and returned with a second supply. When his horror he found the crib empty. Then he knew that without the maiden's advice he certainly would have been lost, and began to put it into practice. He took out the rushes which had somehow got mixed in with the hay and plaited them quickly. Son, what are you doing? Asked the horse wonderingly. Oh, nothing, he replied. Just weaving a chin strap to bind your jaws together in case you might wish to eat any more. The white horse sighed deeply when it heard this, and made up its mind to be content with what it had eaten. The youth next began to clean out the stall, and the horse knew it had found a master. By midday, there was still fodder in the manger, and the place was as clean as a new pin. He had barely finished when in walked the old man, who stood astonished at the door.
Is it really you who have been clever enough to do that?
He asked.
Or has someone else given you the hint?
Oh, I had no help, replied the prince, except what my poor weak head could give me. The old man frowned and went away, and the prince rejoiced that everything had turned out so well. In the evening his master said,
Tomorrow I have a new special task to set you. But as the girl has a great deal to do in the house, you must milk the black cow for her. But take care you milk her dry, or it may be worse for you.
Well, thought the prince as he went away, unless there is some trick behind, this does not sound very hard. I've never milked a cow before, but I have good, strong fingers. He was very sleepy and was just going towards his room when the maiden came to him and asked, What is your task for tomorrow? I am to help you, he answered, and I have nothing to do all day except to milk the black cow dry.
Oh, you are unlucky, she cried. If you were to try something from morning till night, you could do it. There's only one way to keep from escaping with danger, and that is, when you go to milk her, take with you a pan of burning coals and a pair of tongs. Place the pan on the floor next to the stall and use the tongs on the fire. Blow with all your might until the burned coals brightly. The black cow will ask you what your meaning is all of this. You must answer what I whisper to you.
And she stood up on her tiptoes and whispered something in his ear, then went away. The dawn had scarcely reddened the sky when the prince jumped out of bed, and, with the pan of coals in one hand and the milk pail in another, went straight out to the cow stall, and began to do exactly as the maiden had told him the evening before. I don't want to know what it is. Black Cow watched him with surprise for some time, and then said, What are you doing, sonny? Oh, nothing, he answered. I'm only heating a pair of tongs in case you may not feel inclined to give as much milk as I want. The cow sighed deeply and looked at the milkman with fear, but he took no notice and briskly milked into the pail until the cow ran dry. Just at that moment the old man entered the stable, and he sat down to milk the cow himself, but not a drop could he get.
Have you really managed it all yourself, or did someone help you?
I have no one to help but me, answered the prince. But my poor head. The old man got up from his seat and went away. That night the prince went to his master to hear what the next day's work was to be, and the old man said,
I have a little haystack out in the meadow which must be brought in to dry. Tomorrow you will have to stack it all in the shed, and if you value your life, be careful not to leave the smallest strand behind.
The prince was overjoyed to hear that he had nothing worse to do. To carry a little hayrick requires no great skill, he thought, and it will give me no trouble, for the horse will have to draw it in. I'm certainly not going to spare the old grandmother. By and by, the maiden stole up and asked what his task was for the next day. The young man laughed and said, "It appears that I have got to learn all kinds of farmer's work. Tomorrow I have to carry a hayrick and leave not a stalk in the meadow, and that is my whole day's work."
"Oh, you unlucky creature!" she cried. "And how do you think you are to do it? If you had all the men in the world to help you, you could not clear off this one little hayrick in a week. The instant you have thrown down the hay on the top, take root again from below. But listen to what I have to say. You must steal out at daybreak tomorrow. Bring out the white horse and some good strong ropes. Then get on the haystack, put the ropes around it, and harness the horse to the ropes. When you are ready, climb up to the haystack and begin to count 1, 2, 3. The horse will ask you what you are counting, and you must be sure to answer what I whisper to you." Whisper, whisper, whisper.
The young maiden whispered something in his ear and left the room. And the prince knew nothing better to do than to go into bed. He slept soundly, and it was still almost dark when he got up and proceeded to carry out the instructions given him by the girl. First he chose some stout ropes, and then he led the horse out of the stable and rode it to the haystack, which was made up of 50 cartloads, so that it could hardly be called a little one. The prince did all that the maiden had told him, and when at last he was seated atop the rick, and he began counting up to 20, he heard the horse ask in amazement, "What are you counting up there, my son?" "Oh, nothing," he said. "I was just amusing myself by counting the pack of wolves in the forest. There really are so many of them that I don't think I should ever be done." The word wolf was hardly out of his mouth when the white horse was off like the wind, so that in a twinkling of an eye it had reached the shed, dragging the haystack behind it. The master was dumb with surprise as he came in after breakfast and found this man's day's work quite done.
"Was it really you who are so clever?" he asked. "Or did someone give you good advice?"
"Oh, I have only myself to take counsel with," said the prince. The old man went away, shaking his head. Late in the evening the prince went to his master to learn what he had to do for the next day.
"Tomorrow," said the old man, "you must bring the white-headed calf to the meadow, and as you value your life, take care it does not scrape from you."
The prince answered nothing, but thought, well, most peasants of 19 have a whole herd to look after, so I can surely manage one. And he went towards his room, where the maid met him. "Tomorrow I have got an idiot's work," he said. "Nothing but to take the white-headed calf to the meadow."
"Oh, you unlucky being!" she sighed. "Do you know that this calf is so swift that in a single day he can run 3 times around the world? Take heed to what I tell you. Bind one end of the silk thread to the left foreleg of the calf, and the other end to the little toe of your left foot. Ouch! So that the calf will never be able to leave your side, whether you stand, walk, or lie."
After this, the prince went to bed and slept soundly. The next morning he did exactly as the maiden had told him, and led the calf with a silken thread to the meadow, where it stuck to his side like a faithful dog. By sunset it was back again in its stall, and then came the master and said with a frown,
"Were you so clever yourself, or did someone else help you tell you what to do?"
"I have only my own poor head," answered the prince, and the old man went away growling.
"I don't believe a word of it. I am sure you have found some clever friend."
In the evening he was called and said to the prince,
"Tomorrow I have no work for you, but when I wake you must come before my bed and give me your hand in greeting."
In the evening, he called. The young man wandered from the strange shriek and went laughing in search of the maiden.
This is no laughing matter, she cried. He means to eat you, and there's only one way in which I can help you. You must heat an iron shovel red hot and hold it out to him instead of your hand.
So the next morning he wakened very early and heated the shovel before the old man was awake. At length he heard him calling.
You lazy fellow, where are you? Come and wish me good morning.
But when the prince entered with the red-hot shovel, his master only said,
I am very ill today, and am too weak to touch your hand. You must return this evening, when I will be better.
So the prince loitered about all day, and at evening he went back to the old man's room. He was received in the most friendly manner, and to his surprise his master exclaimed,
I am very well satisfied with you. Come to me at dawn and bring the maiden with you. I know you have long loved each other, and I wish to make you man and wife.
The young man nearly jumped in the air for joy, but remembering the rules of the house, he managed to keep still. When he told the maiden, he saw to his astonishment that she had become as white as a sheet, and was quite numb. The old man has found out who was your counselor, she said when she could speak, and he means to destroy us both. We must escape somehow, or else all shall be lost. With an axe, cut off the head of the calf with one blow. With a second, split its head in two, and in its brain you will see a bright red ball. Bring it to me. Meanwhile, I will do what is needful here. And the prince thought to himself, better kill the calf than be killed ourselves. If we can escape once, we will go back home. The peas which I strewed about must have sprouted, so that we will not miss the way. And then he went into the stall, and with one blow of an axe he killed the calf, and with a second split its brain. In an instant the place was filled with light, as the red ball fell from the brain itself. The prince picked it up, and wrapping it around with a thick cloth, hid it in his bosom. Mercifully, the cow slept through it all, but her cries would have awakened her master. He looked around, and the door stood the maiden, holding a little bundle in her arms. Where's the ball? She asked. Here, answered he. We must lose no time in escaping. She went on and uncovered a tiny bit of the shining ball to light them on their way. As the prince had expected, the peas had taken root and grown into a little hedge, so that they were quite sure which way they could go and not lose their path. As soon as they fled, the girl told him that she had overheard the conversation between the old man and his grandmother, saying that she was the king's daughter, whom the old fellow had obtained by cunning from her parents. The prince, who knew all about the affair, was silent, though he was glad from his heart that it had fallen to his lot to set her free. So they went on till day began to dawn. The old man slept very late that morning, and rubbed his eyes till he was properly awake. Then he remembered very soon that the couple were to present themselves before him. After waiting and waiting till a long time had passed, he said to himself with a grin,
They are not in much of a hurry to be married.
and he waited again. At last he grew a little uneasy and cried loudly,
Man and maid, what has become of you?
After repeating this many times, he became quite frightened. But call as he would, neither the man nor the maid appeared. At last he jumped angrily out of his bed to go search for the culprits, but only found an empty house and beds that had never been slept in. Then he went straight to the stable, where the sight of the dead calf told him all. Swearing loudly, he opened the door of the third stall quickly, and grabbed his goblin servants to go and chase the fugitives.
Bring them to me, however you may find them. for have them I must,
he said. So spake the old man, and the servants fled like the wind. The runaways were crossing a great plain when the maiden stopped. Something has happened, she said. The ball moves in my hand, and I am sure we're being followed. And behind them they saw a black cloud flying before the wind. When the maiden turned the ball thrice over in her hand, and cried, Listen to me, my ball, my ball. Be quick and change me into a brook, and my lover into a little fish. And in an instant there was a brook with a fish swimming in it. The goblins arrived just after, but seeing nobody, they waited a little, then hurried home, leaving the brook and the fish undisturbed. When they were quite out of sight, the brook and the fish returned to their usual shapes and proceeded on their journey. When the goblins, tired and with empty hands, returned, their master inquired what they had seen, and if nothing strange had befallen them.
Nothing, they cried. The plain was quite empty, save for a brook and a fish swimming in it. Idiots!
Roared the master.
Of course it was they!
And dashing open the door to the fifth stall, he told the goblins inside that they must go and drink up the brook and catch the fish. And the goblins jumped up and flew like the wind. The young pair had almost reached the edge of the wood when the maiden stopped again. Something has happened, she said. The ball is moving in my hand. And looking around, she beheld a cloud flying towards them, larger and blacker than the first, and striped with red. Those are our pursuers, she cried, and then turning the ball 3 times in her hand, she spoke thus. Listen to me, my ball, be quick and change us both, me into a wild rose bush, and him under a rose of my stem. And in the twinkling of an eye it was done, only just in time, too, for the goblins were close at hand, and looked eagerly around for the stream and the fish, but neither stream nor fish was to be seen, nothing but a rose bush. So they went sorrowing home, and when they were out of sight of the rose bush and the rose, they returned to their proper shapes, and walked all the faster with what little rest they'd had.
Well, did you find them? Asked the old man when his goblins came back.
No, replied the leader of the goblins. We found neither brook nor fish in the desert.
And did you find nothing else at all?
Oh, sure, but the rose bush and the tree in the wood had a rose hanging on it.
Idiots! He cried. Why, that was they!
And he threw open the door of the 7th stall, where the mightiest goblins were locked in.
Bring them to me wherever you find them, dead or alive, he thundered, for I will have them. Tear up the rose trees and the roots true, and don't leave anything behind, however strange it may be.
The fugitives were resting in the shade of the wood, and were refreshing themselves with food and drink. Suddenly the maiden looked up. Something has happened, she said. The ball has nearly jumped out of my bosom. Someone is certainly following us, and the danger is near, but the trees hide our enemies from us. And thus she spoke to the ball in her hand, and said, Listen to me, my ball, be quick and change me into a breeze, and make my lover into a midge. Bird. In the instant the girl was developed into thin air, and the prince darted about like a midge. The next moment a crowd of goblins rushed up and looked round, searching for something strange, for neither a rosebush nor anything else was to be seen. But they hardly turned their backs to go home empty-handed, when the prince and the maiden stood upon the earth again. We must make all the haste we can, she said, before the old man himself comes to seek us, for we know him won't see us under any disguise. They ran until they reached such a dark part of the forest that, if they had not been for the light shed by the ball, they could have not made their way at all. Worn out and breathless, they came at length to a large stone, and here the ball began to move more restlessly. The maiden, seeing this, exclaimed, Listen to me, my ball, my ball. Roll the stone quickly to one side, that we may find a door. In a moment the stone had rolled away, and they passed through the door to the world once again. Now we are safe, she cried. The old wizard has no more power over us, and we can guard ourselves from his spells. But, my friend, we have to part. You will return to your parents, and I must go in search of mine. No, no, exclaimed the prince. I will never part from you. You must come with me and be my wife. We have gone through so many troubles together, and now we must share our joys. The maiden resisted his words for some time, but at last she went with him. In the forest they met a woodcutter, and told them of the great palace, as well as all the land. There had been great sorrow over the loss of the prince, and many years now had passed away since they had found no traces of him. So, by the help of the magic ball, the maiden managed that he should put on the same clothes that he had been wearing at the time he had vanished, so that his father might know him more quickly. She herself stayed behind in the peasants' huts, so that father and son could meet alone. But the father was no longer there, for the loss of his son had killed him. And on his deathbed he confessed to his people that he had now contrived that the old wizard should carry away a peasant's child instead of the prince, wherefore this punishment had fallen upon him. The prince wept bitterly when he heard this news, for he loved his father well, and for 3 days he ate and drank nothing. But on the 4th day he stood in the presence of his people as their new king. And calling his counselors, told them to bring all the strange things that had befallen him, and how the maiden had borne him safe through all. And the counselors cried with one voice, "Let her be your wife, and our liege lady." And, well, that is the end of our story. So what do you think of that one? Sure, a couple of long ones. There's a shorter one I could go through if we want to do a third. What say ye? Third story, or find someone to raid, since I really did start late. Oh, just 2 short stories. Okay, you do a couple of shorter stories. If thou dost desire. Or I could just start out next week with a couple of shorter stories. Up to you guys. Yeah, well, I guess we will slink back over to the bookstore then.
Those were a couple long stories, though. Not gonna lie. It's 2 stories that take an hour and a half. That's really decent ones. So, yeah, the prince being switched to birth, that was an interesting one. I had heard it before, but like all good stories, there's multiple versions of it out there. That one was called the. Let's see what was it. Wait again. The Grateful Prince. Yeah. But there's actually quite a few tales that kind of follow along the same way. Someone getting uh, becoming a servant for someone with given impossible tasks that someone there has to help them figure out the trick. It's usually not the servant because I think that kind of thing shows up. Um Mage catching a princess and his other servant telling her how to do things. There's one that usually ends up being a dark wizard that makes people do things, and one of his other servants gives the hints on how to do it. But I haven't had that task about tying the horse's mouth up so it can't eat anymore, or threatening to burn a cow if it doesn't stop giving milk. Those are fairly new. Uh, the counting the wolves to get the horse to haul in the hay, that was kind of funny. I'm sure it wasn't for the horse, but it was amusing for me. Of course, I'm really kind of curious about the white horse being the old man's grandmother. Maybe it's just named that. I don't know. I didn't catch the cast form. Oh well. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and go through, do the highlight setup on that, and add them to the playlist that I have all the rest of the stories from this book on. So, ooh. Hey Matsu. Oh, so just coming in. Have you been lurking? Okay. So, what did you think of the uh, Grateful Prince? Let's see. Which are the underlying books that don't show up in? I'm just over halfway through this book. Let's see. Beautiful Prince was in Violet Fairy book. Me and my compilation books, they just have the stories from everywhere. Like in a good fairy tale, it's got lots of different sources, and they blend it all together eventually. I'm trying to think if I should try to do another short story or go ahead and end it for tonight and see if there's anyone to raid. Though I did spend the first half hour or so arguing with my sound alerts and plugging my book that's not released yet. my fan because it's blowing on the microphone. How long is the next story? This next one. This is only 3 pages long. Thing is, I usually only do the 2-hour streams. I'm gonna leave it up to other people if they want me to try to get another one in or not. So, should I do another short story or go out for the night? Another story? Okay. Book ribbon out of the way. Okay. Let me get back over the screen. Aha. Okay, so the third story, The Dirty Shepherdess, which is found in the Green Fairy book. Once upon a time there lived a king who had 2 daughters, and he loved them with all his heart. When they grew up, he was suddenly seized with a wish to know if they, on their part, truly loved him, and he made up his mind that he would give his kingdom to whichever best proved their devotion. So he called the older princess and said to her, "How much do you love me?"
"As the apple of my eye," answered she.
"Ah," exclaimed the king, kissing her tenderly as he spoke, "you are indeed a good daughter." Then he sent for the younger and asked her how much she loved him.
"I look upon you, my father," she answered, "as I look upon salt in my food."
But the king did not like her words and ordered her to be quit the court and never again appear before him. The poor princess went sadly up to her room and began to cry, but when she was reminded of her father's commands, she dried her eyes and made a bundle of her jewels and her best dresses and hurriedly left the castle where she had been born. She walked straight along the road in front of her, without knowing very well where she was going or what was to become of her, for she had never been shown how to work, and all she had learned consisted of a few household rules and receipts for dishes which her mother had taught her long ago. And she was afraid that no housewife would want to engage a girl with such a pretty face. She determined to make herself as ugly as she could. She therefore took off the dress that she was wearing and put on some horrible old rags belonging to a beggar, all torn and covered with mud. After this, she smeared mud all over her hands and face, and shook her hair into a great tangle. Having thus changed her appearance, she went about offering herself as a goose girl or shepherdess. But the farmers' wives have nothing to say to such a dirty maiden and sent her away with a morsel of bread for charity's sake. After walking a great many days without being able to find any work, she came to a large farm where they were in want of a shepherdess, and engaged her gladly. One day, when she was keeping her sheep on a lonely tract of land, she suddenly felt a wish to dress herself in her robes of splendor. She washed herself carefully in the stream, as she always carried her bundle with her,
it was easy to shake off the rags and transform herself in a few moments into a great lady. The king's son, who had lost his way out hunting, perceived this lovely damsel a long way off and wished to look at her closer. But as soon as the girl saw what he was at, she fled into the woods swiftly as a bird. The prince ran after her, but as he was running he caught his foot in the root of a tree and fell. And when he got up again, she was nowhere to be seen. When she was quite safe, she put on her rags again and smeared over her hands and face. However, the young prince, who was both hot and thirsty, found his way to the farm to ask for a drink of cider, and inquired for the name of the beautiful lady that kept the sheep. At this, everyone began to laugh, for they said that the shepherdess was one of the ugliest and dirtiest creatures under the sun. The prince thought some witchcraft must be at work, and he hastened away before the return of the shepherdess, who became that evening the butt of everyone's jests. But the king's son thought so often of the lovely maiden with whom he had only seen for a moment, though she seemed to him much more fascinating than any lady at the court. At last he dreamed of nothing else, and grew thinner day by day until his parents inquired what was the matter, promising to do all they could to make him happy as he once was. He dared not tell them the truth, lest he should be laughed at. He only said that he should like some baked bread by the kitchen girl on a distant farm. Although the wish appeared rather odd, they hastened to fulfill it, and the farmer was told the request of the king's son. The maiden showed no surprise at receiving such an order, but merely asked for some flour, salt, and water, and also that she might be left alone in the little room adjoining the oven, where the kneading trough stood. She began to work, and she washed herself carefully and put on her rings, but while she was baking, one of her rings slid into the dough, and when she had finished, she dirtied herself and let the clumps of dough stick to her fingers so that she became ugly once more. The loaf, which was a very little one, was brought to the king's son, who ate it with pleasure. But in cutting it, he found the ring of the princess and declared that to his parents that he should marry the girl whom the ring fitted. So the king made the proclamation through his whole kingdom, and ladies came from afar to lay claim to the honor. But the ring was so tiny that those who had even the smallest hands could only get it on their little fingers. In a short time, all the maidens of the kingdom, including the peasant girls, had tried the ring, and the king was just about to announce that their efforts had been in vain when the prince observed that they had not yet seen the shepherdess. They sent to fetch her, and she arrived covered in rags, but with her hands cleaner than usual, so that she could really easily slip on the ring. The king's son declared that he would fulfill his promise, and when his parents mildly remarked that the girl was only a keeper of sheep, and a very ugly one at that, the maiden boldly said that she was born a princess, and that if she would only give her some water and leave her alone in a room for a few minutes, she would show them what she could look like, and as well as anyone of fine clothes. They did what she asked, and when she entered in a magnificent dress, she looked so beautiful that all they saw that she must have been a princess in disguise. The king's son recognized the charming damsel of whom he had once caught a glimpse of, and flinging himself at her feet, asked if she would marry him. The princess then told her story, and said that she had found it necessary to send an ambassador to her father to ask his consent and invite him to the wedding. The princess's father, who had never ceased to repent his harshness towards his daughter, had sought her through the land, but as no one could tell him anything of her, he supposed her dead. Therefore it was with great joy he heard that she was living, and that a king's son asked her in marriage. And he quitted his kingdom with his eldest daughter as soon as he could be present to the ceremony. By the orders of the bride, they served her father at the wedding only bread without salt and meat without seasoning. Seeing him make faces and eats very little, his daughter, who sat beside him, inquired if his dinner was not to his taste. No, he replied. The dishes are carefully cooked and set up, but they are all so dreadfully tasteless.
Did I not tell you, my father, that salt was the best thing in life? And yet when I compared you to salt, to show you how I loved you, you thought slightingly of me and chased me away from your presence.
The king embraced his daughter and allowed that he had been wrong to misinterpret her words. Then, for the rest of the wedding feast, they gave him bread made with salt and dishes with seasoning, and he said they were the very best he had ever eaten. When parents don't interpret what you're saying correctly, really. Now, that's not the first story the father has misinterpreted his daughter's comparison to how much she loved him. I think I've seen that in 2 or 3 stories, actually. Yeah, it was the king who had 3 daughters, and they showed how much they loved him by how they dressed and how they acted. And one of them always was in a different mindset than her sisters. That's a bookstore. Yeah, that's one of the things I love about fairy tales is they're so got local variety and different versions of it. I think one I told last week, I mentioned how many different versions of it. In fact, that's one of the things I talk about in the books. I have so many comments that I make in the stories. It's like there's 4 or 5 different tones of Little Red Riding Hood, and there's one of them that actually has a second wolf that is another part of the plot. Everything else, it's just fairy tales are localized and realized in different timelines and everything else. Because, like, which one was that thing? It's like soldiers coming back from wars. Like, the war that they went to will change. Besides mine. um, so which story is that? I'm trying to think of it. Oh, well. Wolves do punish people. Oh, the fan keeps moving. Put the thing down and it turns itself back up. First story of the greedy daughter. I have to look that one up. Since I'm always looking for more stories where wolves can be the good guy. At least better.
I did a search of the greedy daughter, and first thing that came up was an episode of reality TV. Yeah, that's scary. Let's see. Short and Shivery. Just sounds like an interesting book. Let's see, that book was published between 87 and 98. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure it would still be on there. But depending on who wrote the story, it may not be. Compilation books are usually easier to get through. Let's see. Ooh, Short and Shivery is an entire series. It's even more fun. Oh, Evelyn Tom Walker. How about that one? Greedy Daughter. An Italian story. Okay. We'll definitely look up the source on that one. But let's see. The Greedy Daughter was in the third book of the series, even more short and shivery. Yeah, I think last Halloween I was reading from The Disappearing Hitchhiker. Well, getting the ideas from The Disappearing Hitchhiker anyway. I ended up doing a lot of improv urban legends that night. I'll definitely have to see if I can hunt that story down, because I'm curious now. Let's see. Who is on? Oh, someone's doing scary stories. Imagine that. What kind of them? That's what Laz is doing. Ah, going back down. Ooh, got a nice voice. He's reading some creepy pasta, and he's apparently got the ASMR mic. So let's go drop in on him. I do like some scary stories, and everyone should like scary stories. I've got the two different red messages. My mode unlock is only 300 points, so that's like if you follow me, you have enough points for it. So let's copy this, make sure it's working right. Should be that. Yeah, okay. So let's. Already last. Okay. Um, Thank you everyone for coming in, listening, and lurking about. Uh, I'll try to keep updated on Twitter about what's going on with the book. Because I don't know if you had seen it yet, Matsu, but I'm doing my own story compilations. So I went through and got the stories from my first couple of streams, and I'm typing them out and adding my commentary and everything else to them. So it should be interesting. So thank you everyone for coming in, and let's go listen to some spooky stories. Read by a demon lord, so appropriately scary. Have a good evening, good night, or whichever your time zone they sign up with. And I'll see you over there. Thank you, Wolfie Pup. 5. Okay, let's go ahead and read. See you there.